With so many units entering the T0 category and also T1 getting a bunch of new characters in here, I think we can make a video talking about what is the current best team to be pushing campaign, both normal and hard, under big combat power deficits, and a little bit of alternatives for every single element when it comes to best 3 characters. That said, before we go into that, hello the internet, welcome back to Waifus. I'm Sefhi, your favorite gambling addict, and today's topic is gonna be campaign team. For some reference, I am done with campaign and I am stuck on tower 1310, which is a snake with a water weak. So unless you have an Omega invested Toro or a Snow White, you are kind of stuck in there. It is what it is, right? Hopefully at 701 I can get past that. That said, let's talk a little bit about what are right now the best teams to push campaign, and in my opinion some of the recommendations and alternatives you could be using if you don't have them. So I think we're going to start with the core units, and then we'll explain why they're core units and give alternatives for them. In my opinion, right now the core units to be pushing campaign are going to be obviously your Anis, your Crown, and still to this day your Rappi. Now this can change a lot, and there is a lot of things that could change. I could even see people saying instead of Rappi as a core unit, put Privacy, or even put Helm, depending on what buffer you like more, or because of the synergy with Crown. But right now, the 2 core units that are the strongest ones to be pushing, and you will see on most, if not clears, are gonna be Anis and Crown, both of them. Now, let's talk about B1s, B2s, B3s, and give alternatives and explain why that is the case. First of all, for Anis, this is the strongest B1 in the game by far. She had the same impact last week when she was released as Crown when she was released 2 years ago. She made every other B1 in the game look a lot weaker in contrast to what she can offer, regardless of element, regardless of team, right? And you guys have plenty of videos already going over how she works and why she is that strong. You guys can check those, right? Alternatives for Anis, in case you don't have her. I think there are 2 main alternatives, and you can use them together, because remember that Anis can be used as a re-enter character as long as you have another B1. So you could be using her as a re-enter B1 with the heals, with the trade-off of losing some of the offensive moves. So the other 2 characters that are still Omega popular are going to be obviously your Siren and your Moran Treasure. Now, Moran Treasure is pretty good. Her damage taken reduction is fantastic, and she's a character that has been seeing usage on hard mode and tower a lot to help you with specific mechanics, be it with true damage bosses like Cease, because she is kind of an annoying bitch, to be honest, with those big hits, be it for characters where you need to be tanking a lot of damage. Like, she will be able to allow you to bypass a lot of annoying mechanics. It is pretty nice. Also, pretty big numbers when it comes to her buffs on attack, 42% right there, and everything she can provide, right? Also with the damage taken and whatnot. So that's the first one. The second one is Siren. Siren's biggest problem right now, sadly, as much as I am a sim for her, is that her buff numbers are not good. She has a 4% attack damage, then she has the damage taken, which is decent, and then she has a 17% of caster's attack. In contrast to newer B1s, she's falling behind, but the Focus Fire still allows her to be at the top of the meta. Focus Fire allows you to control all units in the game with your mouse, regardless of if it's full burst or not. And that is a crazy advantage on a game where you have to do so many mechanics in bosses, right? So that is still why she is such a great unit. Personally, on the last 2 chapters, I've been using Anis and Moran together. Literally on most of these stages, I've just been running both of them together for the combat power, and because they are the only thing you need. Now, other B1s you could still consider, obviously, if you don't have them, are going to be any of the cooldown reduction characters, or like any of your cooldown reduction units can still be used, but they are just less popular nowadays. You can also use, as a glorified Burst 1 character, we'll talk about B3 later, Red Hood. She is still a good unit, her Pierce is fantastic, her Burst generation is fantastic as long as you manual her, and you can use her as a B1 buffer depending on your team composition, right? So that can also work. But that's for B1s, right? There is technically or realistically speaking just 2 more options, which is Moran and Siren. When it comes to B2s, there are a few, not a lot actually, a few options. The first one being Crown. She is the best B2 in the game since she came out almost 2 years ago, if not more than 2 years ago already, okay? Crown buffs are great. She provides the shield, she provides the indomitability, the reload speed, everything you need, she has. Now, she also has something called Royal Attire on her skill too. Right here. Activates when recovery takes effect. Affect all allies, increasing attack damage by a further 20%, right? So, as long as she is being healed every 7 seconds, I believe it is, yep, you will have a 100% uptime on an extra 20% attack damage, which also sums up with the burst here, with 36% plus this 20% plus everything else is provided. Now, for the heals, this is important. Most of you already know this, but let's quickly explain this for new players who might be watching this video. Heals and direct recovery. This is really good because it means if you have someone like Helm, which is healing on every single shot, everyone on the team, right? It means she will have 100% uptime on this. Now, to take into consideration, Helm is healing everyone. If you have someone like Naga instead, which is recovering HP only to 2 allies, right, after 5 shots, it does change a little bit. So you guys can understand this, how heals work in NIKKE. If everyone is 100% HP, right, assuming everyone is 100% HP on this team, and Naga does heal while everyone is 100%, the heals will go left to right. Meaning, on this case, only Red Hood and Grave would get healed and Crown would not be able to proc her skill. So you want to always keep your Crown on the left side of the team. Nowadays, it's not that big of an issue because, you know, we have better healers that will heal everyone on the team, like is the case for Helm. But just to take into consideration, always keep her on the left on your team and you should be good. So, Crown is the best one, but what are other alternatives? Sefhi, another powerful and the only close thing to Crown has been Nayuta, which is a great character that will heal, will have good AoE, really good clear with her burst, and pretty good damage while having some nice buffs. Her buffs are not as good as Crown, however. And when it comes to pure buffers, Crown is the best one, right, for B2s. But Nayuta is a nice contender. You could even be running both of them together if you wanted, just to have the AoE damage from Nayuta and her clear, while still having some of the buffs from Crown. Other B2s you could consider bringing into most of the stages are going to be Aid. It's a really strong one, even outside of Pierce, because she does benefit most of the Pierce characters for the Pierce damage buff, but she has a 55% attack damage regardless, right? And also the attack one. So she has really good buffs regardless of Pierce or not, and it's a powerful one. Another Omega popular B2 that can be considered T0 for a lot of people, but it's paired with other B2s, is going to be Maid Mast. Maid Mast is maybe one of the strongest attack buffers in the game, but you need to manually play her. You need to manually play Mast because she needs to burst every 3 rotations so it matches with her buffs and it also matches with her Drunken status to get a stun, right? That's like the only thing. That's why I don't use Mast too much. But if you go to the highest clears in combat power differences on campaign and hard campaign and in tower, Mast is almost always there. I'm just not a huge fan of her, right? For B2s, there are a lot other B2s you could be using, honestly, like there is literally a lot of B2s. For specific elements, you could be running also Breathe and Steel Helm Aquamarine. They are fantastic for Iron Weak and Fire with content regardless. There is a Steel, your mate Anchor, which was helping a lot on bosses like Seas and bosses that have really big hits where you need the storage mechanic to survive. But those are like the main ones. There is another like 5 to 10 we could talk and give recommendations, but I don't think it's that necessary because the ones we just mentioned are the actual good ones. That's it about B2s. Let's actually go into the important thing of this video. That's going to be B3 characters. I'm going to be dividing this into elements. So I'm going to give 4 recommendations on each element, right? These will only change based on what you have invested. For a lot of people, myself included, what I usually run right now on every single stage is this. Like literally, this has been my team for a little bit while pushing, and I've had no problem. Anis and Moran, Neon and Rappi, and then Grown as the B2 buffer. Sometimes I might just run Private instead for the extra buffs and reload the speed. Sometimes I might put Helm just for the heals. But that depends on what you have invested. Let's go element by element, and we can start with Fire, since that's one of the most popular ones. For Fire, there is not that many options that are available for new players, because the strongest ones are going to be your Rappi and your Mihara, which are both over-spec characters, right? So it's hard to get those two. The other 2 options that will be really good, because Mihara is not great for clears in campaign, is going to be Bestie, and it's going to be the one that I do not have on my synchro, Alice. Alice and Bestie are still fantastic characters. Alice is one of the few characters that since day one has remained on the meta. Still really strong. You have to manual her, however, for optimal damage output, but that is fine since most people pushing big CP gaps don't mind manualing. Now, other characters you could be using here because, for example, Bestie is not good if there is no big combat power deficit, and also outside of bosses, she does lose some damage, right? So similar to Mihara. Other characters you could consider here for fire are gonna be your Drake Treasure, and are gonna be still your Asuka from the collab and the new Diesel/Breed. Diesel is the newest addition. She's pretty strong. I like her, but I have awful lines on her, so I don't use her that often. Asuka is a nice option if you were playing while Evangelion was running the dead banners. If not, it's useless to you, right? And Drake can still be used as a buffer and sub DPS. Obviously, you will be losing a lot of damage if it's outside of the shotgun teams, but she can still be used as a sub DPS while providing some damage buffs. Outside of shotgun teams, however, I will say she loses the majority of her actual good buffs, and you are better off running a normal buffer, right? So that is for fire. The best characters obviously being both Rappi and Mihara. Then we can go into water. There is a few characters in water. Where are the main DPSs for water? So you have your Dora and you have your Snow White. These are the best DPSs for water at the moment in the game by far. Doro came out of nowhere as the first limited pilgrim and was like, okay, I'm super strong. And then like 6 months afterwards, they were like, yeah, but look at this Snow White now. And they released the character with the best AoE clear, the best first generation for campaign. Like, it's a crazy character to be using in campaign, one of my favorites. The only downside is that on auto, she will miss a lot of shots, so you got a manual her for that, right? But outside of these two characters, your Doro and your Snow White as hyper carries, you also have really strong buffers that have good damage. Your Private and your Helm. Private and Helm can be used anywhere on every single team because they are just that good as buffers with their treasures, right? So those two are still fantastic. Other options to consider for water, still your Ludmilla as a debuffer is pretty nice, and then the other one that you could be considering is going to be Quincy and Elec. Anything else I would really not recommend, unless you have like Omega invested Breedy or Emilia. I kind of copy, I'm not gonna lie. Elec is a really good buffer, just like Summer Annie, just like X-Maiden. And then Quincy is a good DPS, and she is using campaign on a few bosses because of her distribute damage. Was it distribute? Yes, distribute damage. And so she is still used for those specific bosses that are water weak and you need distribute damage. So a nice option. That is for water. Then we also have electric. Now electric, before Neon, which obviously is the best DPS to use here right now, before Neon we only had Cindy. It was the only actual DPS. Your only other option if you wanted the DPS was Ain, and Ain has still been super popular because of Mirror Container and the Sleepers. Outside of that, she's still used on raids for those one-shot teams with Miranda, right? But these are the only 3 DPSs you actually have for Electric. The rest are buffers, and for buffers you have 2 really good ones, being X-Maiden and being also your Summer Anis. Both of them really strong. You can pair them with your main DPS and you're good to go because they will increase their damage output by a lot while also still having great personal damage themselves. As for electric, let's jump into wind, my favorite element, right? I have to be a simp for my wind girls, and the only 2 DPSs worth talking about here are gonna be these 2. SBS and Liberalia is the combo that is still using raids even off element, doing really good damage regardless of what element you put them against, right? It's still fantastic. Your SBS will lose damage without Liberalio, but still is a great unit and is the best character to deal with the volleyballs in campaign, which are fucking annoying. Now, for the wind, there are still a couple other units, one of them being Asuka. Asuka can put up a fight against SBS. The biggest issue is, were you playing when she was out, and did you fully invest into her or have dupes to compete with your other characters? If not, not really that important. I wouldn't recommend anything else for Wind because it's kind of a bit of a copium when it comes to mana, when it comes to Summer Sakura, even EH. I love them, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of copium. And then we already talked earlier about Nayuta for these Wind teams, so I'm not going to be mentioning her again, right? And then lastly, we have the last element, Iron, where once again Rappi takes the priority here as the Fire Iron main DPS and main hyper carry, but there are a few other options here as well. The first one, Red Hood. I know we meme a lot with me putting Red Hood on T2, okay, but she is still a fantastic character for campaign. Like, there is 0 issues on using Red Hood. I used her on these last 2 chapters because they were Iron weak and then the boss was Electric weak, right? So I've been using Red Hood, no problem at all. She's still one of the best characters for that. There are a couple other DPSs in here you could be considering, but the biggest problem Iron has is that it's one Pilgrim, one Overspec, and two collaborations character, one being Eve, one being Raven, whatever she is, because I am absolutely blind, by the way. So the biggest problem with Iron is that it's two limited characters, one Pilgrim, one Overspec. Most people don't have them, right? Like, let's be honest, if you're a new player, you're gonna be quite unlucky with that. But those are the best Iron DPSs. Hopefully we get a couple more non-limited DPSs here. Also, a small reminder that Eve will act as a debuffer and sub DPS rather than hyper carry. And also, that Raven now has increased her damage quite a bit thanks to Anis as well. Okay, Anis is increasing damage for almost every rocket launcher in the game, and that is pretty nice. Other characters to consider on Iron, if you didn't have these two, could be where is my favorite sniper and my favorite bunny. Okay, guys, let me actually go for Iron filters, because if not, we're gonna be here 3 hours trying to find them. One here, one here. Both Milk and Chisato are great units. Chisato, once again, is yet another limited character, but a pretty good one for the true damage. And then Milk, if you are willing to manual her, because you need to manually play Milk, she has pretty nice damage output. If you're not willing to manual her, however, put someone else because it's not worth it, right? But that's basically for every single element, a little bit of what characters I would recommend using. Like I said earlier, my team has been just running Counters squad with Moran or Privacy depending on the stage, right? I just been switching literally the main DPS a little bit. So this is what I've been running myself, with Neon being first. And then sometimes instead of this, I might just be running Privacy instead, so you can have coverage for most of the elements, just missing Wind. Sometimes I would just put SBS in there because I need to deal with volleyballs, whatever it is. But these 4 girls have been my core for the most part, unless I need to remove Privacy and put Moran. So that said, enough japping, enough ranting. That's everything for the best characters to push in campaign in NIKKE. Any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment down below. If the video does well, because it's a lot of japping on this screen, honestly, I don't know if the video will do well. But if the video does well, we can also talk about Drive Tower compositions for the manufacturer ones and make a video going over what are the best teams right now after the half anniversary. That's it, enough japping, enough ranting. We are live every single day. You guys have the links in the description down below. Good luck with your pool, dinner rates, and I'll see you in the next one.